Hi, this is Hans Erickson with cgboomer.com, and I'd like to welcome you to day 11 of my work in progress. This will actually be the 7th installment in making my vintage record player. Actually, it's not 100% vintage in that it's also a AM/FM radio, but nonetheless, it's definitely from an earlier time. Uh, as you note, the last time I had finished modeling the player and animated the lid so that it opens and closes. And at this point, we're getting ready to texture, and we just need to clean a few things up so that we can apply textures. One of the things is I had combined the hinges for animation purposes with the lid here, and now that it's animated, it's not really necessary for these hinges to be part of it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to grab, well, let me see, let's change to vertex mode here, and I'm going to grab these hinges here and hit L to grab those. Come over here and do exactly the same thing. L, just hover over a vertex and hit L, and everything is selected. I'm going to hit P and separate by selection. Now they are no longer part of the top here, although if I go ahead and animate, you can see that they still work perfectly fine, and the reason being is when I separated them, they still retain the keying instructions from the previous session, so everything is still pretty much as the way it's supposed to be. The only other thing I have to do now is if I go into object mode is grab these two objects here, and I want to rename them because it just retained the name of the lid. Control and right click, and I'm going to call them RC hinges, and I'll go upper. Then I want to grab these lower hinges, and you can see I've got the two bottom hinges there, and if I, well, let me see, I want to grab this one first and then this one, and I'll hit Control J and combine them, and now we've just got the bottom hinges as a separate item. So we got top and bottom hinges. The other thing that I want to do is I've got this pin here sitting as part of the lid. Well, when I go to texture, I don't want that to be part of the lid. So I'm just going to hit L for that, and I'm going to go hit P, separate those out by selection. They are no longer part of the deal there, and if I click that, well, let me open the lid up a little bit. There you go, you can see it there. What I want to do is I want to combine it with this right here and hit Shift, or excuse me, Control J, and now that's all part of this system here. And if I hit, let me see here, let me go into wireframe because I think I got one more item here I need to kind of clean up. Yeah, sitting inside of here I had this. Now if you remember, this was just a pin that I used to use as a locator, but now I'm going to do something different with it. I'm going to hover over that, hit L to grab it, go into front view. There it is. And I need a spacer within this section here. So I'm going to hit G and X to move it, and I'm going to move it right about over into here. I'm then going to size it on the x-axis and kind of shrink it down a little bit. That looks pretty good. Now I'm going to size it and hit Shift X to exclude the sizing on the x-axis, and so it's only sizing on the X and Y, or excuse me, the Y and the Z, and kind of bump that way up like that. In fact, I could even go a little more. Hit S, Shift X, size it some more, and I'm going to take it up to right about there. Now if I go into solid view and go back, you can see it now looks like a spacer. The only other thing is it's still got kind of a little gap there, so let me go back into here and G through X, kind of move it over, kind of split the difference, and then S and X, kind of grow it both ways, and it may be kind of growing into both items, but it's just, I want it to look like a spacer, and that's exactly what it looks like now. If I go back into solid view, you can see that that looks actually pretty good. So I think we're pretty good to go. We've got all that separated. The front piece, now the textures that these items here that I just separated are all going to be the same textures. This face plate, this bottom hinge, or not hinge, but bracket, the top bracket, and the hinges themselves, both this, and all these are going to share the same texture, and it's going to be kind of a brass looking texture. So now I just have to kind of find that brass texture, and I kind of did a little looking around, and I've kind of decided exactly what it is that I want. So I'm going to go to my website here real quick at cgboomer.com, and if I go over to my links page, you'll see that I have a there we go, blend swap, and it's a collection of free blend files from the Blender community. So I'm going to open that up, and it's something I ran across the other day. I actually visit this quite often because I'm always on the lookout for new textures, new models, and things that other people in the community have done. And one texture that I saw that I really liked real well is this one right here. It's a gramophone. He called it his master's voice, and it's been downloaded 32 times. It's done by let me see, Gayanavi. I think he did an amazing job on that. And I really like that texture extremely well. Well, let me see. And I just really think that, well, I just like this texture right here extremely well, and I want to use it. He's put a Creative Commons license on it that we just need to give him recognition, so I hereby give him recognitions. Giovanni Lanfuti. I'm terrible with the pronunciation, and if he ever looks at this, I hope he forgives me for the pronunciation. But like I say, I think it's just a spectacular texture, and I definitely want to use it. So I have already downloaded that texture, or I've actually already downloaded that, so I'm not going to waste my time doing that. So I'm just going to X out of this, and let me bring up, let me see, where is it? There we go. I'm going to open this up. The only problem that I have with the texture is that it's a completely procedural texture, which means if I hit the game engine with it, you can, which I just hit, and there we go. It doesn't really work at all. And if I just go into textured mode, you can see that it doesn't really work for my purposes. Everything else does, but that's because it's a procedural texture. But I still like the texture, and I want to be able to use it. So one way that we can use it is to very simply go in, and I just need to know the name of the material, and the material name is Thromba, probably for like trombone or something. So I'm going to use that texture, and what I'm going to do is just grab it out of this file. So I'm going to open up a separate instance of Blender, and I'm going to hit File, Append, and I'm going to go to my desktop and grab that file. I'm going to go to Materials, and I'm going to grab that material, Thromba, and bring it into my file. Now if I was to click this cube here and apply that texture, you'll see that there it is, and boom, it is now applied to that cube. Now the lighting isn't exactly right, but if I were to hit let's say F12, you can see that I do indeed have the texture, just exactly what he had. Now let me just do one other thing here. Let me I'll do a cube projection, and now if I've unwrapped it, and now if I hit F12, it should look a little bit better. But as you can see, I've got the texture, and that's looking fairly good for my taste. It's a little dark, but that's mainly the lighting. So what I'm going to do at this point, so that I can utilize that texture, is I'm going to hit X, delete the cube, go into top view, hit Shift S and Shift A, and add a plane. Now I'm going to take my camera here, and I'm going to clear the rotation by hitting Alt R, and clear the location by hitting Alt G, and that brings it directly down underneath there. I'm going to G and Z to bring it up one Blender unit on the X-axis. I'm going to take my lamp here, and I'm just going to change it to a Hemi for right now, because that'll work pretty well, and I'm going to leave the energy exactly where it's at. I might change that a little bit later on. I'm going to grab the camera here, and I'm going to change it to orthographic view. If I hit 0 on my numpad, I can see what I have here. I'll go to my render settings, and I'm going to go 1024 by 1024, and I'm going to bump the render all the way up to 100%. I can then go into my settings here, and I believe if I set the orthographic scale to 2, that will completely enclose this right here. So now if I were to click the plane again, I can come over to my material settings. I can grab that material, and all of the textures are set up automatically for me. So all I have to do at this point is if I were to hit F12, you see that it rendered out nicely. So all I have to do at this point is go to Image, Save As. I want to save it as a JPEG, and I want to save it in my work in progress, day 11, my video files, go to Textures, and I want to call this, we'll just call it Brass. BRA Brass .jpg, and go ahead and save it. And I'm pretty well done with this file now. I can just kind of close it. I can then go over to my work in progress files. Let me get over here and vid files, textures, and you can see I've got it right there. If I open up the GIMP, there's my texture. Now the one thing I would like to do is I want to make it seamless, so I'm just going to go ahead and use the make seamless in the map to deal here. I think that'll work out just fine. And the other thing I want to do is I just want to make it a little more yellow. So I'm just going to come over here and grab this yellow slider and just kind of yellow it up a little bit. And I think that's going to work out just fine for me. I'm now going to go ahead and just go File, Save As, Brass, and Color, and save that. Okay, now I also want to make a bump map out of that, or a actually I'm going to make a NOR map. So if I go into colors and desaturate it, and I'm going to set it to average luminosity, then I'm going to go into colors and I'm going to invert the colors because I want the white going the opposite way. Now I can go over to my, now this, I could bake it, but actually I can just, I've got a plug-in here and I've explained that plug-in in another tutorial, so you can go back and review an earlier tutorial, but I got this plug-in that automatically will make a normal map for me, and for this purpose it'll work out quite fine. So if I just click OK, you can see my normal map is a little bit, it's really not enough. So I'm going to revert back here and I'm going to hit my filters again and map and hit normal map, and I'm going to bump this up to, let's say, 10. And let's take a look at that and see how that looks. Actually, that looks pretty good. That looks like a pretty good bump map or normal map. So now I'm going to hit File, Save As, and change the COL for color to NOR, and save it. The next thing I want to do is I'm going to go back up here to where I did my color balance. I also want to make a detail map, and a detail map is nothing but this same texture repeated a lot to kind of bring out, so if you ever do a close-up you can see more of the texture. It doesn't kind of you know, blotch out on you. So I'm going to go into filters, map, and I'm going to go into small tiles, and I'm going to duplicate it 5 times. That means it's going to tile the same size. It's going to duplicate it 5 times this way and 5 times this way, so it's going to repeat this pattern in the same area in 1024 by 1024, 5 times 5, which would be 25. So I'm going to hit OK for that, and you can see it did exactly that, and it seems to repeat very, very nicely. But I'd like to get it to 50, so I'm going to go back into my map, go into small tiles again, and I'm going to change this to 2. So now it's going to repeat itself 2 times this way, 2 times this way. It's already at 25. So, well, actually it'd be 4 times, so it'd be 100. And so now I'm just going to hit that, and now I've got a pretty good detail map. Now I'm going to go save as, click my deal here, and I'm going to change that to DET for detail and save it. Alright, if I now go into my textures here, you can see that I have my original brass color, brass detail, and brass snore. I'm going to take this one here because I don't really want that, and I can always redo it and just delete it so that it's not sitting in my textures box. And I should be pretty well good to go now, and I can now go ahead and start doing my metal and just see how that looks. Okay, now that we have those that texture set up, let's go ahead and start applying it, and let's go ahead and start with the bottom hinges here first. So I'm going to go to UV editing, and you can see I've kind of changed the UV editing, the default UV editing a little bit to kind of suit my needs, but this will work out just fine for me. Let me see, if I hit Control 1, that'll put it into a back view for me. I've grabbed my hinges there, and let's go ahead and apply a color or a material, and there are no materials in this setting right now, so I'm just going to have to click New, and I can go ahead and leave it this default color right here, because the color is not really going to be color is not going to affect this texture whatsoever. So the next thing I'm going to do is just go ahead and hit and go into edit view. You can see it's unwrapped, kind of unruly, but I'm going to go ahead and hit U for unwrap, and I'm going to use what's called Smart Project, and I'm just going to kind of leave it at that. I think that actually will unwrap, is a good unwrap for what it is that we're doing. And going over to my textures panel here, I'm going to click New, change this to Image or Movie. One thing I want to do is come back over here, and I want to start calling things what they are. So I'm going to call this brass. Come over to here, and I'm going to call this texture BRASS underscore color. I don't want generated. I want it to be a UV. I'm going to go into my textures, and I'm going to grab the brass color, hit open, and it's already on color here. So if I kind of zoom in here and change to textured, you can see that my lighting is not right, so it's not going to show right. So let's go ahead and go back over to default view. Now I'm not going to do a full lighting on this because I just want to be able to get the lighting so that I can see what I'm doing. I'm not trying to do scene lighting right now, so I'm just going to click on this lamp here, the default lamp that's set up here. I'm going to move it, excuse me, G to grab, and I'm going to move it just kind of behind my camera right here, and I'm going to change it, I think just a Hemi for right now. I'm going to rotate it towards my model in top view, and again in side view, and go to front and rotate it so that it is rotating right within my model there. I'm going to change its energy to 0.75. I'm going to Shift D to duplicate, Shift D to duplicate it, and I'm going to then rotate the duplicated one, just kind of line it the other direction, about 180 degrees or so. Go back into my side view, do the same thing, rotate it, and in top view, that looks pretty good. So I'm then going to grab both these lamps and I'm going to move it to another layer right over here. And I don't know what happened there. Let me see. Go M to move to that layer. There we go. Now if I just grab that, they're both highlighted there, and let me go back into 7 here. Let me just rotate both of these so that it kind of bisects that just a little bit better. And I think I'm going to be happy with that right now. So now if I go back over to my UV editing, you can see my hinge, and that doesn't look too bad. Might be a little rough right now, but I think we can kind of fix that up maybe a little later. I just kind of want to get the textures in there right now. So let me grab that, and we want to add my detail now. So I'm going to come over here. I'm going to do the same things as before, image or movie, hit UV. I'm going to open up my textures here and go brass detail and enter that in. And now if I zoom in here, you'll see that this very last texture is the one that took over. And that isn't exactly what I wanted. Let me change this to brass, B-R-A, brass, D-E-T for detail. What I want to do is I want to affect the texture, but I want to make it an overlay. Now if I zoom in, you can see, and I'll show you the difference right here. Let me click it off once, and you can see if I zoom way in here, if I click this off right now, you can see how my detail just kind of washes out a little bit. But when I add my detail, you can see that it kind of pops right back in. So it looks a little bit better in views that are a little more close up. It's a little dark right now, and the one way that we can kind of affect that a little better is I'm just going to kind of turn the color down a little bit, maybe to let's go 0.5. Whoops, 0.5, and that looks pretty good. I'm gonna fly with that. I'm getting a little bit of a glare right there, and I don't want that much. So let's go over to the brass setting. You can see where I'm getting that glare. I don't want it to be quite that hard of a glare, so I'm going to bump my intensity for my color all the way up, and I'm going to take the specular intensity and I'm going to take it down. Oh, let's go 0.1. Let's see how that looks. Metal should have a little bit of a shine to it, but not quite as much, because I want it to be kind of dull. Okay, the next thing I want to do is I want to add my bump map, or actually my normal map. So let's go ahead and do exactly the same thing. Image or movie. Changes to UV, so it maps to the UV coordinates. I'm going to open and grab my normal map, and you can see how it applied immediately. Hit the normal map there, click off color, and check NOR. And if I kind of turn that on and off, you can see how it adds the relief or the bumpiness to it right away. Now that might be just a tad bit too much, so let me turn this down to 0.5, and I think that looks a lot better. Um, okay, I'm sorry for the small interruption there. If you heard a shattering noise in the background, that was my 3-year-old granddaughter tipping things over. So I had to take care of that. So anyways, the bottom hinges are done for now. We may go ahead and refine these all a little bit later on. But I'm just going, now that these textures are all set up, I can just grab my upper hinges, and I can go into edit view, and again hit U, smart project, and I think that did a pretty good job of kind of laying things out. And go back into object view. I can then just go over here and just grab that texture, and boom, it's already applied, looking pretty good. I can then come to my bracket and go ahead and tab in, select all of it, hit U. I'm going to smart project that as well, and you can see it kind of laid things. The smart project actually works fairly well in some cases, not every case, but it's working well in this case, so I'm quite happy with that. So again, I can come over to here and just hit brass, and boom, it's applied. I can then come over here and do exactly the same thing. Tab in and make sure everything is selected. Go into, hit U, smart project, and come over here, hit brass, and go back into object view, and you can see that it is applied. Not bad at all. I may want to clean all that up a little later on. I think that's looking a little bit too bumpy, but I'll fix that a little later on. I'm going to go to the face, grab it, slip into, okay, yeah, it's okay. I'm going to go ahead and try the project from view again. This one may not work, but let's just go ahead and hit smart project and go ahead here and apply the material, and let me take a look at it. This I'm not really liking real well. I think one thing that we could do to improve this greatly is the sizing of it. So let me go ahead and put my cursor over here and just hit A for all, and I'm just going to just size all of this up here, and you can kind of see in the viewport exactly what's happening. And I'm just going to keep running it up until I kind of get what I want. I could go the other way too, but I think this is about what I want. Let's go ahead and increase that just a little bit more, and I like that. I like that a lot better. I think that's about what I want. It's got about the right shine to it. It's got the graininess in there that I want for the antiquing. Now, I wouldn't worry about this area here too much, this center area where the dial is going to be. That is actually going to be a completely different texture. In fact, we can take care of that right now. Let me just kind of come into here, and I'm going to grab this face area here. Let me change it to face mode here. I'm going to grab that one. I'm going to grab all these faces right here. I can hit C and grab all of that. Let me get right in here and make sure that I've got everything. I want to grab that face, and this face, and this face. And grab that face and that face. This part can be a little tedious, but it's really kind of necessary to get what it is that I want to do. Grab that. This. Okay, let me grab these. Oops, missed one. Grab that. Oops, that and that. And do I have it all? Yes, I do. Alright, I now want to duplicate this texture panel right here. And I want to take these areas that I had just chosen and assign it to that texture. I want to go over to the textures here. I have two things I can do. I can duplicate it, or let me just come over here. What I need to do is remove the sharing of it. So I want to make this a single user copy, and so if I click to make that single user, it's now brass 001. I can then come into here and I can call this, I'll just call this dial. Oops, let me get my capitals right. D-I-A, dial. I can then come over to here and I can remove these textures. From that area there. Now when I come into here, you can see that that is no longer affected. Even though it's part of that mesh, it's no longer affected, and I can do something different with it. And in fact, a little later on, I'm just going to make that clear. I'm going to project a dials and other things on it, but for right now, it's even though it's part of the faceplate, it has got a completely different texture setting there, and that'll work out just fine for me. So I'm going to say that my metal areas are done for now. You can even see that even though I increased the sizing on the front panel, it didn't affect any of the hinges or anything. And like I say, I can change all of that later on to suit my needs. But for right now, I'm going to call that good. Okay, I just want to do a quick disclaimer here as well. I am probably not the best for texturing and also for doing materials, but the one great thing about the Blender community is there's a lot of resources out there, and just like this metal texture that I'm using that I kind of like, I was able to kind of procure that from people that do a far better job than me, and it just makes it so much convenient, and I just want to thank the provider of that again. But as long as we're on the face panel here, the one thing I want to do here is I'm just going to grab this button here, and I'm just going to go ahead and make a material slot for that, and this will be a new material, and I'm going to set the intensity all the way up on the diffuse, and I'm going to run the intensity down here to 0.05, I think, and I'm going to grab the diffuse and run it all the way to black, and I'm just going to kind of call that good. I think I'll add some actual other procedural textures to it a little later on, maybe a little bump, but right now I'm going to call that good. It's got the right amount of shininess on it for kind of a hard plastic. I might play with the hardness a little later on, but I'm going to grab this button here, and I'm going to also use that same material, and I probably should name that material, and I'll just call it buttons. buttons. It's actually buttons and dials, but nobody really cares. The other thing is, now I've got the same problem as before. This dial, which is going to be eventually an arrow, is now that black, and I don't want it to be, so I'm going to tab in and make sure everything's deselected, and I'm just going to hover over here and hit L just to grab that area there. I'm going to duplicate that texture slot and again remove it as a single user. I'm going to assign it, and I am then going to just change that all the way back up to white for right now, and I will make it clear a little later on, but I just kind of wanted to remove that right now so I don't forget, and that'll work fine. And I'm just going to change this texture name to arrow, and that works quite well. So I've got buttons and arrow. I'm now going to come over to here and grab this, and you can see that I've got these buttons here that I also want to share that same texture with. If I click into it, I'm going to deselect everything, and then I'm going to hover over and go L, L, L. I can take these buttons and deselect them, but I'm not going to. I'm just going to go ahead and assign and change it to buttons. And then I'm going to hit Control I. Oops. Control I to select everything else. I'm going to duplicate this texture here, and I'll call this, I'll just call it Stylus, S-T-Y, oops, I can't do that yet. I've got to make it a single user. Now I can call it Stylus, S-T-Y-L-U-S, and I'm going to come into here and change, oops, I'm going to assign these vertexes to that and run that all the way up to white again, and I will play with that a little bit later on. But I've got these dials here all set, and these dials here, so I've got all of that kind of taken care of. I'm going to go ahead at this point and save my work where I'm at so I don't lose anything. And the next thing I think I'm going to proceed with is the wood. So I'm going to kind of click back here to default for a second. and go into textured mode here so I can kind of see what I'm doing. And I need to find a nice wood. I want to put a nice fine wood on this part here and this part down here, the base and the top. And so let's see if we can find a nice texture for that. One resource that I found for textures, and I think I've mentioned it before, is, and I've kind of saved it here, is CG Textures, and I use this quite a bit. All of them are free to use. If you have not paid for this site, which you can, you are limited in how much you can download, but I don't really download that much from it, and so I go ahead and let's take a look here. Quite a bit here. Actually, I think the one that I used before is right here, and yeah, I think that is, in fact, that is the one that I've used before. I'm just going to go ahead and grab the, now I can't get the huge because that's for premium members and I'm not a premium member right now, but I can download the large version. And I'm going to save this. Let me jump up to where I'm at here. Documents and CD Boomer. Work in progress. Day 11. Vid files, textures, and save. And I've just now downloaded that particular one, and I can X out. Now if I go into that day 11, the difference between post files and vid files is I practice doing what I'm doing first on post files, and the vid files are what I'm actually using here. I'm going to open this up in the GIMP, and there I've got exactly that. There's my texture, and I'm going to use it just exactly as it is. I'm not going to do a whole lot to it, but the one thing I am going to do is I'm going to go ahead and map it and make it seamless. Does actually a fairly good job of doing that in this particular texture. I'm then going to, and I can show it by going to map. Here we go, and do small tiles, and I'll just change it so it repeats 3 in each direction. And you can see it repeats quite nicely, actually blends in quite nicely. So let me go back to my original here, and I'm going to go File, Save As, and I'm going to call this Color, and save it. I'm going to go ahead and make my normal map as well. So I'm going to go into Colors, Desaturate, use Average, click OK. Again, I'm going to invert the colors, use my normal map again, and I think I'm just going to take this up to 5, I believe. It should work pretty good. Let's take a look. That doesn't look too bad. I think I can live with that quite easily. So let me go ahead and go File, Save As, and we'll call this Wood and we'll call this normal. And let me go ahead and save that. And I'm going to do the same thing as before. I'm going to make a detail map. So let me just go over to filters. Let me see, map, small tiles, and I'm going to repeat it 5 times in each direction. And then I'm going to come in here and go into filters, map, small tiles, and I'm going to map it 2 times in each direction now. And I have this pattern just repeated just a ton of times. I'm going to go hit File, Save As, and I'll call this one Detail. And go ahead and hit Save. And I can exit out of the GIMP again, and I should be pretty well good to go. I'm going to do the top first. So let me just go ahead and take this top, and I'm going to move it to a separate layer just so I can kind of work with it a little bit easier. I'm going to go ahead and close the lid. Put it back on frame 1 and pop out of that top view there, or that one layer there, so all I have is the lights all I have is the lights and the object that I want to texture. Let me go over to UV editing. I'm going to go into top view, and let me try and just go ahead and go into edit view, click all, and I really don't like the way this thing is laid out, so I'm just going to go ahead and try the unwrap Smart Project and see how that works first. And what it's done is kind of taken all these little sides and everything and just kind of laid them out. Let me go into material, and I'm going to add a new material, and I'm going to call this fine wood. Go over to textures. I'm going to hit new, image or movie, UV. I'm going to open up would find color, and I'm going to rename this, not going to rename there, I'm going to name up here, I'm going to call this wood color, just so I can kind of keep track. And everything else is probably fine the way it is. Let me just tab into here and see how it looks. Now, right now, every one of these grains are going exactly the way I don't want them to go. So what I'm going to do is go into edit view here, and I'm going to hover my mouse over on this direction, on this panel over here. I'm going to hit R to rotate, and I'm going to go 90 degrees, and let's take a look. That seems to be much better. Let's take a look here. Yeah, I wanted my grain to go this way on the top, the same way on the bottom, and on the sides I want them to go that direction there, and it actually seemed to do exactly what I wanted, and the same thing to the inside. So I'm actually kind of pleased with that. This just happened to work out just exactly what I wanted. It's a bit too shiny for me at the moment, so I'm going to go ahead and grab my intensity for my material all the way up, and I'm going to take the specular, and I don't want it to be quite that shiny there, and let me go, let's say 0.05, and that looks about what I want. Alright, go back over to here, and now let's add my detail, and again we'll change it to image or movie. Make sure we're mapping to the UV, and let me go back over here and make sure I mapped to UV. Yeah, I did. And we'll change this to wood detail. Run down here, I'll open up, find wood detail, open, and change my mix to overlay, and I'm going to just kind of run that color down to 0.5, and let me kind of just zoom in here, and if I kind of click off that, you can see how it kind of washes out. When I add that, you can see quite a bit more of the details, so that again is exactly what I wanted. The only other thing I want to do now is kind of add the grain in a little bit. So I'm going to come over here and again go image or movie and change to UV. Make sure I click normal map, open, textures, normal map, open, and you can see how the grain is going to pop out and show. So all I have to do is click off color, add my normal geometry, and I can zoom in here. If I kind of click on and off of it, you can see quite a bit of difference of what it's done. So again, I'm happy with that, and I'm going to leave that as my top the way it is. I'm going to grab that again here. I'm going to move it back to the top layer there and click on that layer, whoops, so that it shows. Let's go back to default here, and looks pretty good. I'm actually going to be happy with that for right now. But the only other thing we need to do now is do the base and also these textures in here, the speakers, and that is actually going to take a little bit of time. So I'm just going to kind of leave it at that and call it quits for right now, and I'm going to make a separate video for that. This is probably going to take a couple sections because this right here is going to take quite a bit of time. From what I remember, when I textured the base before, I had to do quite a bit of modifying to get it to lay out the way that I wanted it to lay out, and also to separate this. So I think next session I'm going to be texturing the base, and then the final areas that I'm going to be doing is the dial and the arrow there, and then I'll move into texturing the turntable and the spindle and the stylus itself, the stylus base, and that's going to take just a little bit of time. So it's probably going to be a good 3 sessions in getting all the textures the way that I want it. And then I'll do some fine tweaking and we'll be good to go on it, and we can move on to making a laptop. So again, this is Hans with Erickson with cgboomer.com, and again, this file, or this blend file at the state of this work in progress, will be available on my website for download along with all the textures. So feel free to go ahead and download it, play with it, change it however you want, and just have some fun. And any improvements that you make, I would love to hear about them. You can email me, or just leave a comment. And because I don't consider myself a guru, I consider myself just as everybody else is kind of learning how to do things. So if anybody's got a better way of doing something, please let me know. So again, this is Hans Erickson with cgboomer.com, and happy blending.